Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. We're going to be going over the SuperDraft PGA event today. As was the case in the last couple weeks, we're giving away a couple of tickets to the main contest. To be eligible for the tickets, either comment on the SuperDraft Twitter post or subscribe to the SuperDraft or Advanced Sports Analytics YouTube channel and put your SuperDraft name in the comments. Stuart, how's it going? You ready for low-scoring PGA week?
Yeah, so I think actually this week is going to set up quite similarly to last week. We saw and kind of discussed on the show the opportunity for high volatility, which might give some opportunity for us to roster successfully low multiplier guys. We talked about, and we do like a weekly SuperDraft article. Like Lebioda was a guy who came up. Sure enough, multiplier max had a T5, 10 under. Answer got off to a slow start. And Answer, was super chalky, but appeared to be quite good chalk at 1.25 and got off to a slow start, but cruised his way back to fourth, 11 under. And looking at this course this week, I think we're going to get some similar traits, some similar kind of lineup construction thoughts, and that it's looking like a potentially high volatility course. Down-weighted importance of pretty much all stroke types except for approach play. And so when I see like a bunch of strokes gained features are down-weighted, like it doesn't mean that players that score well in that category are likely to fail. It just means that almost across the board, like one's latent skill is kind of less importance, which to me seems, to align with just high volatility scoring. And like last week, it's going to be a scorer's course. I think we saw DeChambeau win last year with 23 under and Lashley win the year before with 25 under. So I think even just like those two guys kind of speak to the volatile nature of this course. We saw Lashley, qualify in, the early week qualifiers, go on to win. And then the year after, we saw DeChambeau kind of, this was during his post-COVID run that he was on. So, best golfer in the world at the time, and then a guy who qualified on Tuesday. And I think that's going to be how it kind of plays out. So expecting a lot of scoring. Think it's a good opportunity to sprinkle in some low multiplier guys that look like they fit the course well, or just are in good form, because like last week, expecting there to be some opportunity for some deeper plays to climb towards the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, I think all of that is correct. As you mentioned, it's a high volatility course. Easier courses on the PGA Tour tend to be much higher volatility. This is one of the easiest courses on the PGA Tour. I think it basically comes down to the idea that there's a lot of randomness in putting, and we're going to see players, everyone in the field, hit a lot of greens in regulation on an easier course. And so a lot of the results are just determined by 12-foot putts. And most listeners of this show probably know that a lot of that is determined by chance. It's like what random bumps your balls hit on the green on the way to the hole. So there just is a lot of natural volatility on an easier course like this. So I think a lot of people will be influenced by last year, where Bryson and Matt Wolff battled it out. It makes one think that it's a bomber's course. That's not completely true. If you look at the longer history, there is certainly an advantage to bombers, but there are a lot of guys that have great course history here that are not bombers. And if you look at the betting market, you have guys like Webb Simpson getting great support. Webb is long enough, but he's not considered a bomber. And then the betting market support is also there for guys like Neiman and Reed, who are long but not pure bombers. And I think Bryson will get tons of ownership this year based on the 7-1 betting odds and just based on the coverage last year where it seemed like he just absolutely dominated, and it was so easy for him to get fours on all of the par fives, and then he was driving on or close to a lot of the greens on the par fours. So I think he will get a lot of interest this year. So in terms of our model, there, as usual, there are a lot of high multiplier guys that we like. It's not nearly as extreme as it was last week where we were just on all high multiplier guys, but basically when you're looking at the stars of the field that are going to be 1.2 and below multipliers, the first one that we find in our model is Patrick Reed, who we rank 13th currently. And the top players in the field are Tringali at 1.45, Chris Kirk at 1.45, Austin Eckroat at 1.65. Then you have two mid-multiplier guys that rate very highly for us, Zalatoris at 1.25 and Kokrak at 1.35. I think a lot of builds that we will suggest for tournaments will have like this sort of Zalatoris, Kokrak, Reed, and then sprinkle in your choice of high multiplier guy. Eckroat seems like a great play. He's a young up and comer from OSU. I think he's 22 or 23. He has betting market support and should be a great value at 1.65. So how are you rating the high priced sort of low multiplier guys? Do you see this as another week where most of those plays are stayaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. Like, to me, DeChambeau feels like, I think like all these guys at 1.1 and to 1.15, I mean, have some risk for sure. DeChambeau, I think is almost a lock to make it through to the weekend and would figure to be extremely strong odds to finish top 10. But at 1x, I mean, like, you just look at how his win played out last year where he beat out Wolf. I don't know what Wolf's multiplier was last year, but the SuperDraft scoring is so heavily skewed towards birdies and kind of strokes, such that, even if DeChambeau gets first, it's not nearly enough of a point delta. It's only, 2 extra points between first and second. Like, it's not clear to me that at 1x there's a ton of paths towards DeChambeau, even if he wins, being like necessary as part of like, your optimal tournament lineup. Pardon the dog in the background. So, there are, I mean, like, obviously if DeChambeau wins, he is good. He would rather have him in your lineup than not. But for the people that do land a DeChambeau W, if they don't have the right, extra pieces, they're going to struggle to put together like a tournament winning lineup. And I do think taking shots on some of these lower multiplier guys and getting the right ones is going to be potentially more valuable than correctly landing like a DeChambeau win at 1x, or even correctly like hitting a Simpson or Matsuyama win at 1.1x. I do think you're going to have to get some correct hits with some of these 1.2 and up guys. And as our projection system suggests, we are in favor of taking shots with some of those guys. I do think you just need to be, like we talk about this every show, being careful with not overexposing yourself to high multiplier guys. Like if you take our optimal from last week, we had good hits with like Answer, Lebiota, but then some near misses on the cut with like Eckroat, Tringali. I forget who some of the other low multiplier guys we were super high on. Griot, maybe. I think like Griot, Tringali, and Eckroat all were one stroke off the cut line. So yeah, I do think kind of layering in your lineups where you set rules like max one of Eckroat and Lebiota, or at least one player from kind of the 1.1 to 1.2 range, so that you do get some stability with guys like Reed. Guys like Neiman, we seem to like a lot. Simpson, even. That way you kind of give yourself a mix of high upside guys because of their multiplier, but also stable guys, such that you're not taking 6 shots on 5% guys to make it inside like the top 10 or so. DeChambeau would be a guy that I would probably I think you could take DeChambeau. We seem to project him just as well as about Simpson and Matsuyama, but I think limiting yourself to like one of these 1.15 and below guys makes a lot of sense. You just don't give yourself access to enough upside if you have, for tournament purposes, if you have 2 guys with low multipliers, because I just think there are going to be a handful of high multiplier guys like 1.3 and up who find their way into the top 15, top 20 or so, and correctly getting those guys is, I think, going to be of more value than landing a 1x or 1.1x guy who finishes inside the top 3 or something like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. The best play this week overall is probably a guy like Neiman, who is almost a lock to make the weekend. He's made 22 of his last 23 cuts. He's a great ball striker. Hard to see him going wrong. Has a strong multiplier, tons of betting market support. He's like at 25 to 1. I think he would be a great play. As we mentioned, Kokrak and Zalatoris. Eckroat, I think, even though he's 1.65, I think there's somewhat safe. Who would be in a lot of my lineups. So if we look at our current optimal, we have Lebiota in there as another high multiplier guy. The current optimal is Zalatoris, Kokrak, Tringali, Kirk, Eckroat, Lebiota. And unlike last week, our optimizer, the top optimals are not bundled up so close together, so that we do like our top 10 optimals a lot more than, say, like our 100th best lineup. And we're having a hard time in the optimizer going away from the high multiplier lineups. So it's pick your guy: Bryce Garnett, Austin Eckroat, Lebiota, Kirk. And then usually we've got 2 or 3 of these mid multiplier guys that we think are high value, like Kokrak, Zalatoris, Tringali, Grillo. And this is a week where you really need 6 for 6. You really need to pay attention to the cut. Most of the time, the books, if you're the type of person that likes to get all their information from sportsbook odds and use that for DFS, the books, they don't have reliable prices for cut odds until somewhat late in the day. So like on Wednesday afternoon. But on Wednesday afternoon, you can go to betfair.com and look at the cut odds or top 20 finish odds, stuff like that. Or you can just look at DraftKings Sportsbook or whatever and take that. But you kind of you kind of don't want more than one person who's less than 60-70% to make the cut, especially in sort of a small field tournament like this weekend's SuperDraft tournament. It would be nice if we could incorporate that into our model, but the problem is that this information just comes far too late in the day, right? Have you ever seen some good places to get cut odds?
I haven't early in the week, but I mean, I think that win odds are, I don't know. I think like win odds are correlated well enough with make the cut odds, and like I think that's one of the advantages of using like a smart model type as opposed to just a straight linear regression. Linear regression and by name is looking at all variables as linear variables, and I think the relation, if you were to plot out like maybe this would be an interesting exercise in coming weeks, but if we plot out win odds versus cut odds, I would guess that it's like a non-linear relationship as you probably get to like, I don't know, 100 to 1 plus or 150 to 1 or something like that. You begin to see like very sharp decline in win odds relative to like make cut odds. For example, like the guy that's 10 to 1 versus the guy that's 30 to 1, I would guess have pretty similar make cut odds, but maybe the guy who is 100 to 1 versus 120 to 1 probably has a bigger, at least my hunch would be that there would be kind of a bigger delta in the probability of making the cut at that 120 versus 100 to 1. But yeah, so that's the benefit of using like a nonlinear algorithm so that we can kind of detect different relationship change points, I guess, in some of these variables. Yeah, I feel that I think our model does a pretty good job of kind of navigating some of that stuff. Golf.
If people want information that is very good, although not quite as good as betting market prices, if you're getting great betting market prices, datagolf.com does a great job. And I don't know what their model is at datagolf.com, but it is their make cut doesn't seem purely driven by the win. Just for instance, this week they have Webb as only 2% less likely to make the cut than Bryson, but he's more than 2% less likely to win. So he's like 4.9 versus they have 7, and then they're basically the same to make the cut. It's and they have a great live predictive model as well for sweating if once the tournament is ongoing, seeing the probability that your players make the cut or win. But yeah, in a smaller field size, it becomes more important to really focus on getting 6 of 6 through, because the likely winner in, say, a 300-person field is 6 of 6 through, and then hopefully have the winner in kind of a very imperfect group of golfers other than that.
Yeah, and I think the 6 of 6 importance is upweighted on a good scoring course, right? Like if you make it through to the weekend and kind of sneak through the cut line as maybe a sub, not a exceptional golfer, but you just play your first 2 rounds well at a difficult like major style course, making it through to the weekend guarantees you fewer positive points on a difficult course. So, I mean, sometimes, if you have a terrible weekend, like we've seen like Johnny Vegas blow up or something on the weekend, sometimes making it through to the weekend can even be negative points, but on such a good scoring course, like we're going to see in Detroit, making it through to the weekend just guarantees you positive expectation per round and a really quite a high positive expectation. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, obviously you're always striving for 6 of 6. But I think on a weekend like this, getting the high multiplier guys in your lineup who make it through the weekend are a guaranteed positive expectation per round at like a massive multiplier is going to be super high value. So yeah, I mean, I would say one to two guys in that range. We do like Eckroat a lot. He doesn't have exceptional win odds, but seems to have a good course fit. It has a decent or kind of above average approach play, which figures to be upweighted. And then Lebiota we touched on. He's been golfing quite well lately, and he's like a perfect fit for this course. He's below average in putting around the green and off the tee play, all of which figures to be downweighted at Detroit Golf Club, but an exceptional approach player. Over the last 6 months, he's gaining 0.72 strokes in approach play per round. That's the third highest in this field, with the likes of guys like Zalatoris, Bradley, Griot, Decky, Homa. So he's just an exceptional approach player, but just kind of below average in everything else. So I think Lebiota really for me stands out yet again. He was awesome last weekend at kind of a similar course. Expect him to be really good this weekend too.
Yeah, so I do think that range of the 1.6 guys are very important. The very high multiplier guys, which ones you choose. We have a preference for Eckroat and Lebiota, but there are other guys in there like Jonas Blixt, Hogue, Warinsky. These are guys that our models likes quite a bit, and hitting that 1.55, 1.6 person could be very, very good. Dylan Fratelli is another one. Robert Streb. These are the type of players that you might pepper in to differentiate. So if you're playing around with our optimizer, what I would recommend is go to the projections tab, sort by value, and take a look at the guys that are just below the ones that are making our optimal lineups, but usually just a few points below in an actual projection, and pepper some of those high multiplier plays in your lineup. I don't really have strong views as to which of those high multiplier guys I like the most. And in the mid multiplier, again, our tier 1 mid multiplier are people like Tringali, Kirk, Zalatoris, Kokrak, Grillo. And then the tier 2 that are not going to make the optimals but could be differentiators are players like Roger Sloan, Doug Gim, Straka, Redmond, Stallings, Kyle Stanley, Pat Perez, Ego, Cam Davis. So if you're looking to differentiate, I would look and not be afraid of that tier 2 in both the high multiplier and the mid multiplier. Differentiating there makes a lot more sense according to our model than playing around with the top 5 golfers in the field like DeChambeau, Matsu, M, Simpson, Day. We really don't like those guys so much.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think Blender says it a lot on our on the football shows with Roto Grinders, but sometimes you have an optimizer will seek to optimize and not really consider different range of outcomes, and sometimes to get the right mix of risk reward that you want, you kind of have to make the optimizer do things that it doesn't naturally want to do. So if you are playing around with the optimizer, using the groups and rules effectively, and saying sure, I mean, from a projection standpoint, maybe loading up on mid to high multiplier guys makes sense, but it's from a risk management standpoint, putting something in there having at least one of DeChambeau, Webb, Matsuyama, Neiman, I think were some of the names we like, and say, give me all lineups where I have at least one of those guys, so that I have, with one of my lineups, or with every one of my lineups, I have one guy that I feel is like, 90+% to make the cut. And then you could also set rules to like avoid having too much exposure in any one given lineup to like these high multiplier guys like Hogue, Lebiota, Blixt, etc. So that you're kind of just giving yourself one extra guy that you think is like 90+%, and limiting the number of guys that you have that are high upside because of their multiplier, but also 40% or lower to make the cut, and kind of having most of your lineups condense around these guys that are in kind of like the 70 to 90% range to make the cut. Have the healthy multiplier like we do with Tringali, Kirk. Zalatoris at 1.2 is kind of a hybrid in that he's probably a near lock to make the cut, but also has that high multiplier. Kokrak, Griot, I see as kind of high variance, just kind of his golfing style. But using groups and rules effectively in PGA is super important, and also managing like variance components with bounce or randomness. I think if you are doing no rules, no bounce or anything, like, you run 100 lineups. I'm just looking at exposures now, 100 lineups with only 25 unique golfers. And, there's not really any SuperDraft tournaments that allow for 100 lineups. So, I mean, if you only had like, I don't know, I'm not sure what the max is on the long drive, but if you have like 15 lineups and you don't impose any sort of diversification factors, like you're just going to get super tight player pools. I prefer to, have pretty high for PGA, like diversification parameters, such that, we get kind of a larger pool of players. Ownership in PGA is never too high for any one player. So, I think I'm okay with some of my best, favorite plays being in the 50% exposure range. I don't know that there's any one guy that you have to like lock onto, or any set of guys that you have to like lock onto or have, at 70+% exposure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that'll do it for the Rocket PGA tournament. Look forward to getting back on next week.
Yep. Talk with you guys then.